Well, hello and welcome to Faith, Philosophy and Life with me, Mr. Shalom. It's great to see you again. Today we're thinking about where Catholics get their authority from, and so authority, I mean their teachings, their structures from, and their what becomes official church teachings, the catechisms, the CCC, which you see referenced so much. So the question is, where do Catholics get their authority from? I'd like you to just have a quick think about that now. Where is it that church gets their teaching from? Okay, you might say the Bible, that's a really good thought. You might say church leaders, that's also a really good thought. And some of you may have even come up with the Holy Spirit or your own conscience, which is very good if you've got there. It kind of becomes like this triangle, okay, where you've got this idea of it's tradition, the church has taught it, it's taught by the priests and the bishops and the popes, and it's always been that way. You've got a spiritual, which is the Bible. So the Bible teaches it, therefore, because it happened, Jesus did it, it's in the Bible, therefore it must be true. And then you've got personal, which to do with conscience. If you've not come across this before, I like to think of it as teaspoon: traditional, spiritual and personal, TSP. Traditional, spiritual, personal. And that would be, I think, a really good thing for you to be aware of. So what I'd like you now to do is just go and grab a pen and paper. Here's our cheesy intro music, and then I'll just ask you to write this down in your book. Okay, so we need a title first though. So our title is What is the Magisterium? What is the Magisterium? And we're going to explore how the Magisterium is central to the Catholic Church. Okay, that's our title. What's the Magisterium? And we're going to explore how the Magisterium is central to the Catholic Church. As usual, do pause me as we go. It's going to be a good outcome if you can describe what the Magisterium is. It's going to be great if you can explain what the Magisterium does within the Catholic Church. It's going to be even better if we can consider if we think the ordinary or extraordinary Magisterium is most helpful today and why. That's going to make sense as we go through. So we're going to look at some forms of authority. We've got a media clip, we've got a worksheet, and then we're going to review where we're up to as well. I had said we'd come back to this, so what I'd like you to do, please, is just to make a note of this in your book, so you've got it as the TS&P and you understand what those differences are, and make sure you label it as about where Catholics get their authority or their teachings from. So pause me now and then come back to me. Okay, so we need to know what the Magisterium is to start off with. So again, there's a definition behind me. I'd like you to have that written down in your notes. Obviously, you can put that in your own words. That's absolutely fine. I'm not going to read it to you. It is there. So, in addition, the leaders of the church, popes and bishops, have further explored their faith. The particular authority is called the Magisterium. Now, this is what we kind of just spoke about. The Latin means magister, meaning master or teacher. And the Catholic teaching is this particular authority rests with the Pope and with the bishops. Jesus gave the apostles the authority to preach, and Catholics believe, that the present Pope and the bishops can trace their appointment and ordination back to the first apostles, and that's what's known as Apostolic Succession. So basically the idea is that bishops have had their hands laid on them by previous bishops, you've had the hands laid on by previous bishops, you've had their hands laid on them by previous bishops, and you keep going back, and you will get to Peter being the first pope, and Peter has been appointed directly by Christ. And that's what apostolic succession is. And this all fits within the traditional, or the tradition element of our triangle about where Catholics get their authority from, because they say there's a direct lineage back to Jesus. Now we need to go under the hood a little bit more about the Magisterium, and you needed to be aware of that term of apostolic succession. So from Mr. McMalinari, I'm sure that you have seen him previously, because he is just amazing. He's put a little video together which I'm going to link in here, and there's a worksheet as well in the Google Drive directory which I'd like you to access, and I'd like you to answer the questions on the worksheet whilst you are watching this. So use the description below and get access to that. I'm going to play the clip right away, and then you're going to come back to me.
So what is the importance of the Pope for Catholics? As we saw with the first Pope, St. Peter, being the head of the Church includes both authority and responsibility. This authority and responsibility has been handed down to the current Pope. So what authority does the Pope have? The Pope is the Bishop of Rome, which makes him the overall leader or head of the Catholic Church. The Pope is sometimes known as the Vicar of Christ, and included in this title is the belief that the Pope has the authority to appoint, and also where necessary to remove, bishops and cardinals. We'll say more about cardinals later. He also has the authority to speak ex cathedra. This means to speak infallibly, or without error, on issues of doctrine. This doesn't mean everything he says is perfect, but rather means that in certain circumstances, when speaking on areas of doctrine, which is Catholic belief, he can infallibly define the official teachings of the Catholic Church. In reality, this happens very rarely, the last time being in 1950, although more on this in the next video. Finally, the Pope has the authority to lead the Magisterium, which we'll come back to later. So what responsibilities does the Pope have? He is responsible for directing and guiding the Church. He is seen as a global figurehead and ambassador for the Church. As has been seen since the election of Pope Francis in 2013, the Pope has an ability to impose his particular character on the Church and what it focuses on. In Francis's case, a focus on the needs of the poor. This is also why the Pope spends much time visiting the Church around the world, providing encouragement and direction through these visits and his writings to the whole Church. Connected to the idea of apostolic succession is the understanding of the role of the bishops. If St. Peter was the first Pope, then the apostles were the first bishops. The English word bishop is a translation of the Greek word episkope, which can be found in the New Testament meaning an overseer. This was someone who had authority and responsibility over an area or group of individual churches. Today, a bishop is an ordained priest selected to have oversight over an area of churches called a diocese. Bishops too, like the Pope, by virtue of apostolic succession, have both authority and responsibility. They are given the authority to ordain priests, and they have the authority to administer the sacrament of confirmation. They also have the authority to correct and discipline priests who fail in their duty to proclaim and live out the Christian faith. Bishops have the responsibility to ensure that the Catholic Christian faith is being taught accurately and authentically by the priests in their diocese. This means they must advise, visit and counsel the priests, as well as stay in regular communication with the laity of the diocese. Now to return to two things I mentioned earlier in passing, cardinals and the Magisterium. Cardinals are very senior bishops selected to have significant responsibilities. Most cardinals are selected to have responsibility over a larger collection of dioceses, often grouped by country. For example, Cardinal Vincent Nichols was selected in 2014 by Pope Francis to be a cardinal and to lead the Catholic Church in England and Wales. Some cardinals are selected to have responsibility for a particular area of the Church's work. For example, George Pell, who was originally Archbishop of Sydney, was selected in 2014 to work at the Vatican in Rome and to lead the Secretariat for the Economy, which works looking after the finances of the Catholic Church. Together, the Pope and the College of Cardinals form what is called the Magisterium. This is the decision-making body of the Church and is responsible for interpreting the teachings of the Church for the lives of Christians today. For example, there are many issues that Christians face today that are not dealt with in the Bible, simply because they did not exist. For example, should a Christian today support the use of genetic engineering? It is never mentioned in the Bible for the obvious reason that it didn't exist. It is the responsibility of the Magisterium to interpret the teachings of Jesus and the Apostles, reflecting on the teachings of the Church throughout the years, and prayerfully provide counsel and guidance for Christians to navigate these issues today. The Magisterium provides the ultimate definitive understanding of the Church's teaching, which it does by the publishing of the Catechism, which is the official teachings of the Catholic Church. I found it useful to help understand the church hierarchy by comparing it with something that many of you will be familiar with, a school hierarchy. Most schools are led by a headmaster. The headmaster usually has a small group of deputy or assistant head teachers who together form what is often called a leadership group or senior leadership team. They have both authority and responsibility over the running of the school. Below the leadership group, there are heads of department, for example the head of English, the head of maths, the head of RE, etc. They have responsibility over the individual teachers in their department. The teachers have responsibility for what happens in their classroom and looking after their students. In the church, there is the Pope, who is like the headmaster. The cardinals are the equivalent of the assistant head teachers. Collectively, the Pope and cardinals form the Magisterium, which is like the leadership group in a school. The bishops, who have oversight over a number of churches, are basically the heads of a diocese, just like the heads of department in a school. The teachers are the equivalent of a priest, having responsibility for a specific classroom, like a priest who is responsible for a specific church or parish. And finally, the students are like the laity, the ordinary people who make up the majority of the organisation. Now, some of you might have a board of governors in your school who are over and above the headmaster and the leadership group. They ultimately guide the headmaster, although don't get involved with the day-to-day running of the school. Well, in the church, if we really want to keep this comparison going, we could consider the Trinity to be like the board of governors, who sit over and above the Pope. One final quick technical note. One of the key terms for this unit is the word papacy. Some of the textbooks define this simply as the office of the Pope. This phrase can be a bit confusing as it seems to imply the papacy is an actual physical room with a desk and a computer where the Pope sits and does his work. Actually, the word office is being used to refer to a position of authority rather than a physical room. It might be helpful to compare it with another position of authority. We can refer to the Queen as the monarch, but we can also say that she has the authority of the monarchy. The word monarchy refers to the authority of the position without referring to a specific king or queen. Similarly, the word papacy refers to the authority of the head of the church without referring to a specific pope. So pope is to papacy as monarch is to monarchy. Thanks for watching. I've been Mr. McMillan.
So we said it'd be good if we describe what the Magisterium is. So if you know that, then you know what the Magisterium is, which is brilliant. And we said we'd understand what it does within the Catholic Church. And again, hopefully that clip that we've just seen has really helped with that. So we've done our forms of authority, we watched our media clip. There's now a worksheet I'm going to be asking you to work through. So again, in that description below, you'll find this worksheet. This goes through maybe 8 questions for you to answer, and this will give you all the information that you need if you were to have an exam question on the purpose of the Magisterium. So you might get a B question that says describe what the Magisterium is. So I'd like you to do that now, please, and then come back to me. So this is going to take you at least 10 to 15 minutes to do. So pause me now and let's get that worksheet answered fully in your books. Okay, so what we've done now, in that sheet you'll have read about the ordinary and the extraordinary Magisterium, so that means that you have got an idea there about what I'm talking about now. We know what the Magisterium is, and we know we can describe the Magisterium. For our final activity, we're just going to review some of our answers together from that worksheet, because it's really important that we know what it is that we are talking about. So the Pope can make an infallible statement based on the extraordinary Magisterium and the ordinary Magisterium. So an infallible statement is one which is considered to be correct and unchangeable. Magisterium we've already talked about as being a teacher. So we've got the extraordinary Magisterium then. How many have there been? There has been 21 councils. Who attends them? Okay, so again, you've got that information from that sheet. So that's the Pope, sometimes priests, deacons and laity, they're but only to observe. So it's really bishops and cardinals and the Pope. That's who attends them, and give two examples that have been agreed. Well, that Jesus was both fully God and fully human, and that Mary could be called the Mother of God. What you've then got as well is you've got some questions there about what are ex cathedra statements. They're statements that the Pope has said that are considered to be perfect statements. They are not, that they're infallible, you cannot argue them. There have only been 2 extra cathedra statements, and one of those was being about the Immaculate Conception or the Assumption of Mary. There are then some questions on the back of the sheet that I'm sure you saw. If you didn't, maybe pause me now and get those done. The ordinary magisterium, that comes from things that Catholics would just learn or be aware of. It's something that is living in our lives today. It's not new teaching, but one that we just always were aware of. And this is different because extraordinary magisterium is information that you've been taught, whereas this is something that's sort of innate within us, for want of a better word. Pope St. John Paul II wrote Evangelii Vitae, and that's a really good example of ordinary magisterium. It's stuff that you'd argue that would make sense, and it would encourage a Catholic, because it's this idea that you have this concept of you already knew that, and if you already knew that, then you should feel confident in your faith. So there we are. I'm going to leave that there. I think I've covered it all. Thanks very much for your time. Take care of yourself. Stay safe. Wash hands. God bless you. I'll see you soon.